Okay, hello everyone, bonjour. My name is Devin Mancuso. Thank you for the introduction, Coog, and thank you for all coming out early to hear this presentation today. And a big shout out to the whole team from NFT In for giving me this opportunity to come here with Paris today with you all and share some of our story. So as Coog mentioned, I am a director of product design by day at a company called Dropbox in California. But by night, I also work on NFTs as a co-founder of the project Shinsai Galverse, a project born out of Tokyo, Japan. I'm here with you all today on behalf of Dropbox to share a little bit about behind the scenes, a sneak peek into how we made Shinsai Galverse, and share with you some of our learnings, some of the mistakes we made, and our process. When we were starting out as a small team, it really helped us when other teams would share how they built their NFTs. And so now that we've launched our project, we want to give back and share the nitty-gritty details with you all. So hopefully there's some interesting learnings in here for you. Shinsai Galverse is an NFT project with the mission to create an iconic anime, an animated series that we hope will inspire a whole generation of young women and get us to rethink the way that anime in Japan is traditionally funded, created, and published. It's led by two amazing artists from Japan. Emi Kusano is our creative director. She's here today. She's going to be presenting later on. And Ayaka Ohira is our lead artist from Japan. A lot of the great work you'll see today is actually Ayaka's illustrations. So in many ways, I'm presenting on her behalf as well. She couldn't be here today and make the trip out from Tokyo to Paris, but she asked us to send you all a quick message, so let's roll that now.
Hello everyone. ギャルバースのリードアーティストで、イラストレーションも担当している彩香です。今日はギャルバースがどのように作り上げられたのかについて楽しんでいただけたらと思います。
Thanks, Ayaka. Ayaka VTubing there is her gal character from the NFT. So we are a small but mighty team. There's only 4 of us, and we're scattered across the globe. Emi and Ayaka based out of Japan, Jack Wailalau, our community and communications manager based out of Australia, and myself working on product and technology based out of California. Galverse, the team Galverse met in October, late last year, and we launched our collection in April this year, so it was a quite short time frame. We launched an art collection of 8,888 unique pieces of art that were made using a combination of generative technology as well as Ayaka's unique 80s, 90s nostalgic anime style. And our slogan is Wagma, we're all gonna make an anime. Try and get the crowd to shout that one out later maybe. So Wagma, we wanna launch Web3's first collaboratively created Web3 anime together. When Emi and Ayaka were growing up as young girls, they loved watching anime, right? And they really loved sci-fi anime. But they're a little disappointed that the female characters often played a background role to their male counterparts. They dreamed of an anime where badass gals were at the front and center of the anime. And so Galverse is that dream come to life. We use the profits from our token sale to fund our own anime, and we're partnering with a studio to bring that to life in Japan. And we're bringing our whole community along with us. So they get to come behind the scenes and learn how anime is made in Japan, something that you don't usually get to see because studios keep things a little bit secret. So it's an exclusive look for our token holders. They also get to use their NFTs to vote on governance proposals that will influence the direction of the project, the company, and the anime, so they feel really involved and a sense of ownership over the final product. But it wasn't always so easy. It was a tough road to get here, and we faced a lot of challenges. As a team distributed across multiple countries and different time zones, it meant that we had to work remote first by default. And there was a huge language barrier to overcome. With a mix of native Japanese speakers and native English speakers, it meant we relied on asynchronous chat a lot of the time, using tools like DeepL or Google Translate to talk to each other. We also had never met each other in person until a couple of months ago. We largely met through DAOs and worked completely on Discord. So we were building trust at the same time as we were building a project, which was a little scary. In a brand new technology space. At the time, back in December last year, there weren't a lot of tutorials or guides on how to launch an NFT project. We didn't know. We were kind of making it up as we were going along and learning a lot along the way. I want to take you through the full process end to end, from pre-generation to our launch, and get into some of the nitty-gritty details. So let's start with pre-gen, because there's so much work that happens before you even touch the first line of code in a generative project. The first thing we did was sit down with Ayaka and really talk about what her vision were for these characters. What did she see in her head? We looked at different styles, lots of sketches and exploration, different aesthetics, pixel art, nostalgic art, all the different ideas that she had. And early on, Dropbox was at the center of all of this. It was our source of truth. As we gathered inspiration from around the web, produced sketches and concepts, the whole team could access it here in one place. Finally, we settled on this 80s, 90s nostalgic anime gal style, and Ayaka went to work building a rig, a skeleton upon which we could base the characters and start to iterate with lots of different traits and layers and all the ideas she had in her head. Pretty cool. And she would send us regular updates through Dropbox. We'd occasionally get new drops of layers or ideas she had. This was one of our biggest milestones. This was the first time we saw one of our gals come to life. It's not a lot, changing some eyebrows and some different mouths, but it was an exciting moment for the team to really get a sense of, wow, this is what this could look like at the end of the process. We had to decide on a tool. Which tool were we going to use for our artwork? And we settled on Photoshop. It was complex enough that we could handle the special effects within the platform and also had a reasonably good layer grouping system to help us keep organized. So within Photoshop, we would form kind of the core file, the base camp for managing all of our art assets throughout the project. When Ayaka delivered the final art files to us, we were surprised by two things. First, there were over 2,000 layers in the Photoshop file. I was a little bit shocked. We'd never seen an NFT collection this big before. And secondly, they're all in Japanese. So it dawned on me and Jack that we had a little bit of work ahead of us for the next month, translating everything from Japanese to English. Not to mention uncovering references that Ayaka included, like references to famous anime or Japanese cultural items. We had to rename, translate, color code, and group all of the different layers within the collection. Now, one thing that's really been important to Galverse from the very beginning is diversity and representation within our characters. We want the world of Galverse to be diverse with all types of gals. And so Ayaka not only created a whole bunch of color variants for different items, hairstyles, things like this in the collection, she also created 11 different skin tones. This would ensure that we could generate a whole cast of characters to fill the Galverse world, but it also added a lot of complexity once we got to the generative code, which you'll see in a minute. But it was totally worth it. Once we launched, we received a lot of tweets like this. Fans of anime from all over the globe who said, I never thought I would see an anime character with my skin tone. I'm so excited. This was so heartwarming for us to see as a global team ourselves and made all the extra effort worth it. So, many weeks later, over 2,200 Photoshop layers, renamed, translated, color-coded, and grouped, we finally had our anatomy of a gal, 23 trait categories or groupings within Photoshop that would make up the layers that we would then use to composite and build the gal characters that you'll now see today. We learned a lot in this early stage, and I think the big takeaway was that this conversation around metadata, it might seem simple just grouping layers in Photoshop, but it has big flow-on repercussions for your entire workflow. It's an ongoing conversation between engineering and the artists, and so it can't just be one-sided. It's ever-changing and evolving, and all members of the group need to be involved. Okay, so I was up next. I had to work out how on earth we were going to use technology to generate what was arguably the biggest NFT project I'd ever seen in my time. I'd never seen a project with so many layers, and I was a little overwhelmed of where to start. Back in December, if you were thinking about generative projects, you really had two pathways you could go down. You could do on-chain generation, which means that the logic for combining all the artwork is in the smart contract itself. Or you could do off-chain, which means that you kind of pre-prepare the artwork first, and then it's ready to distribute at launch. If you're going off-chain, you could use one of the many off-the-shelf tools that people are offering, or you could use an open source solution or make your own if you're a team with programmers and engineers. Blockchain purists really enjoy on-chain generation. There's a certain respect for it. But off-chain offers the creators a little more control. There's an opportunity to bug fix and tweak any artwork before it goes out to users. Given just how many layers Ayaka had and the complexity, we decided to go with off-chain, and we used a tool that we were familiar with the team called Bueno, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, when I talk about complexity, I think it's worth taking a minute to look at just how complex we're talking here. Similar projects at the time, remember this is back in December, the Apes, Cool Cats, Azuki, they had 100, 200, 400 traits max. Ayaka had produced 2,200 traits. Galverse was just a little bit bigger than the average project. So that's why we decided to go with an off-the-shelf tool. It would take the technical burden off of our team so we could focus on the artwork. Bueno is a great tool, and it provides a kind of simple UI on top of the generative process, which makes it a little bit easier to handle things like rule generation, rarity scaling, and previewing your output when you're constantly generating new iterations. So the first thing when we got access to the Bueno beta is we just dropped in all 2,000 layers, and we hit generate to see what we got. As you can see, the results are a little early. Definitely not cute, not kawaii at all. It's a little bit of a mess. All the traits are applying. Things are conflicting with each other. It doesn't have that nice silhouette. So we had a lot of work to do. We needed to introduce the rules. In a generative collection, rules are what kind of help you govern the chaos, right? They're rules that apply which layers should mix with which other layers, or which layers should definitely not mix with which other layers. The first thing I did was open up a Dropbox paper doc and just start typing, listing out all the rules I could think of, starting simple with things like cat ears shouldn't mix with bunny ears, things like that. After the first afternoon, I had about 50 or 60 rules down. I thought this was going pretty good. And I told the team, I think this will roughly take about 4 to 5 days. It doesn't seem too bad. I then started working on bringing those rules from the Dropbox paper file into the Bueno engine. This looked like kind of a line-by-line, if this, then else kind of statement. And so here I'm trying to match a front hair with a back hair, and you can see there's one rule line for that. What we didn't anticipate is, for every single color that Ayaka had made, we had to duplicate another rule. So what I thought would be one rule all of a sudden became 12 rules. Very quickly we went from 50 rules to 100 to 200 to 400, and Bueno could not keep up. The app was crashing every single day. We were losing work. We were very stressed. But luckily, the Bueno engineers were amazing. They were on call with us in DMs every day. They were rebuilding the app nightly for us, writing features just for Galverse to keep the app running and keeping up with our complexity. We started writing custom CSS to inject into the web app to make the drop-downs bigger and the text smaller, just so we could see all the data we needed to within each part of the UI. After the 4 or 5 days that I had estimated, things looked a little better, but still a little messy. So we had work to do. The next 4 weeks were grueling, countless late nights, very little sleep, working through thousands upon thousands of layer combinations, writing rules, testing logic. I had countless notebooks like this, checklists as long as your arm, just to keep me motivated working through all the layers. And finally, not after 5 days, but probably about 5 weeks, we had the finished rule set. 2,189 generative rules that would ultimately power what would be the gals that you'll see today. Yeah, a little much. But there was hope now. There was a light at the end of the tunnel. As you scrolled through the collection, the gals were looking great. We were starting to get a sense of what this project will finally look like at the end of this process. There was one last thing to do, and that's think about rarity, the process of which traits will be most common or which traits will be most rare. We did a lot of logic and mathematics in Google Sheets, and then translated that over to the Bueno tool where you can set the rarity on a per trait basis. We were ready to hit generate and see our finished gal collection. This part of the process was daunting. It was a lot, and we'd never done anything like this before. Our big learnings were this. The first mistake we made, I dropped all those layers in at once, all 2,000. I thought it would be fun to see, but what it actually did was clutter up the tool, and it was so much more complex than it needed to be. As we applied rules, we couldn't tell which ones were working and which ones weren't. We should have started out simple, maybe just put in the skin tones and the eyes, built it up from there. That would have been a smarter thing to do in hindsight. We also started generation much later on, almost like a waterfall process. We waited for Ayaka to finish before we started the generative work. We probably should have started a little earlier, got more familiar with the tool, and it would have become a back and forth process between Ayaka as she was producing the art and on our side as we were doing the engineering. We also relied on a vendor. It was a tricky decision to us of whether we should write our own script or use the Bueno tool. In this case, we got really lucky. Bueno engineers were great. They worked with us every day, fixing bugs, keeping the app running, writing custom features just for us. But it could have gone a very different way. If we didn't have such a responsive team, I think it would have caused us a lot of headaches. And lastly, we didn't talk about rarity until the very end of the process. We didn't want it to influence the art process based on, collectors and what ones they wanted to be most rare. But looking back, I think we could have decided on rarity a little earlier, and it might have been an interesting kind of creative input for Ayaka as she was thinking about how she wanted to design some of the traits. So we'd hit generate, and it was time to move into post. We found ourselves with a Dropbox folder full of 8,888 JPEGs and 8,888 metadata files. There was a lot to go through to get this ready for launch. One of the biggest things we learned as we started to migrate from the generative process to getting it ready for the sale was that the metadata was all wrong. The categories that we'd used in Photoshop made sense for us as a team, and they were good for organizing all of the artwork. But when we thought about bringing them into a user's wallet or a marketplace, the same categories didn't work. Marketplaces use these categories to drive the navigation and the filter systems. So having duplicate categories that were great for splitting art between different layers actually was total chaos when you looked at it on OpenSea. So we had to do some remapping of all the traits in JSON, writing some Python scripts to move text around. We renamed some categories, we collapsed some. In the end, we ended up with this final set that we would take to the collection launch. We then started to think about what would it look like when a gal appears in a user's wallet. We wanted the gals to look cool when you showed them off to your friends. Very late in the process, the team made a tough call. We said, we want these gals to come alive. We don't want to call this token gal0483. We want it to have a name and a story. We want it to have personality traits. We want it to have hidden Easter eggs in the metadata that people enjoy hunting out and finding. This was a lot of work to introduce, only a few weeks away from launch and pretty late in the process. In order to provide this much lore, we would need 8,888 names, stories, and countless other metadata. We weren't really sure what to do, so we turned to our community. We posted out on Discord and on Twitter, and we said, give us your suggestions. And the community turned out. They provided hundreds of suggestions of names and stories and ideas for cool metadata from different countries, cultures, and languages all over the world. We took all of that info, we dumped it into OpenAI. We used machine learning to generate thousands of possible combinations, and then we manually curated those to create the gals that you'll now see today. Back then, you have to keep in mind, there weren't a lot of tools to do this. We were basically writing our own. We used Google Sheets to build our own metadata reviewer. We could randomize the different metadata coming from OpenAI and start to get a feel for what was looking good. We also used Dropbox as a file host and built our own web apps just for previewing the PNGs and the JSON data at the same time for quality checking so that the team across the world could be checking hundreds of gals a day, no matter what the time zone was. Dropbox Paper came in handy here as our bug tracker. As each team member was reviewing hundreds of gals per day, looking for small visual inconsistencies, making sure they were all pixel perfect, we logged bugs in a paper form like this, and then when I would wake up in my time zone, I'd be going through and fixing the generation. I'd planned a relaxing vacation to Mexico at this time, thinking we'd be totally finished by now. It didn't work out that way. I spent a lot of time by the poolside checking to make sure eyebrow colors matched hair colors. RIP my vacation. But it was all worth it. At the end, we had our Dropbox folder full of 8,888 finished gals, and it was time to launch. The launch month was crazy. We had a big paper doc that tracked all of our milestones and tasks, and every day we were meeting on Zoom just to work out what was next. Road showing with potential investors, creating social media content, last-minute development work on the website and the minting tool, smart contract. It was chaos. But launch day finally came. As a team, we jumped on Zoom together to watch the chaos unfold. A little stressful, but ultimately a great day. We sold out in 5 hours, way faster than we ever expected. And the results were great. We went #1 in the world. A big milestone for a Japanese project. In terms of 24-hour total volume, we were #1, beating out huge blue chip projects, even Bored Apes that day. Our community was ecstatic. A day later, we threw a big party. Everyone gathered on Discord, and we revealed our gals live all at once. Everybody hitting refresh, seeing the gal they'd minted, and sharing it with their friends. Our next big milestone, that instantly broke OpenSea. We're excited about that. BrokenSea, a couple of challenges for us. The platform is not designed for collections as complex as Galverse. We found an interesting quirk. OpenSea's menus cap out at 100. Galverse has hundreds of hairstyles and traits and items. OpenSea doesn't know what to do with it. To this day, they haven't fixed the menus. We've talked to their engineers. They're not sure what to do about it. So we've had to come up with other ways for our community to explore the Galverse collection. Many NFT collectors use tools that are called rarity tools. Rarity tools help you uncover what the rarest NFTs are in a collection, but they don't understand Galverse. Too much breadth, too much diversity, too many unique gals. Gals that looked okay, we're ranking really highly, and incredible looking gal combinations were ranked really low. This really frustrated collectors who rely on these tools to try and snatch up the rare NFTs. But we love that. We say, you decide what's rare. Lore over floor. So the launch was a great success. We had a lot of fun, and we've been busy ever since. We've been spreading the word of Galverse across Japan, the West, all over the world, being featured in magazines like Vogue, appearing on national Japanese TV, which was a lot of fun, in the papers, and throwing events across the US for our community. And the community's been no slouch either. They've been bringing the gals to life, VTubing with their gals, and TikTok and game streaming, making fan art, even making their own Galverse comics, which has been so fun to see. But the work doesn't stop there. We've been busy shipping amazing engagements and activations for our community to keep them engaged in the Galverse world, while we've also released our Galverse manga that Ayaka has been working on and is releasing kind of page by page for our holders as an exclusive benefit. And we're also partnering with a studio into Japan to break ground soon on the Galverse anime, but some more announcements on that soon still to come. As a remote team that works across the world, a lot of our work happens on the web, right? In the browser. We're using web apps like Google Docs or Dropbox or Google Sheets. That means that we're not dealing with files as much as links and tabs. But in the NFT process, we're still dealing with a lot of files. Ensuring that we can store, sync, and share files, be that PNGs or Photoshop files or metadata files, is critical to this kind of work. And so we really couldn't have done that without Dropbox's tech at the core of the project. We made use of Dropbox for file storage, file hosting, sharing data between the team. Paper was pretty indispensable as a tool for project planning, bug tracking, and is really great for bilingual teams where you can copy-paste stuff straight in from Google Translate. Transfer was pretty useful for taking those big data files and shipping them across the world to our development teams or other vendors. And we used Capture to create video walkthroughs, which was honestly pretty good for overcoming the language barrier sometimes. So thank you. I know that was a rapid-fire walk through the process. Hope there's some interesting lessons learned for you. If you're working on your own NFT project, we'd love to hear from you. We love to pay it back and love working with new creators in the space. So thanks a lot for your time today.